Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Theology on the Rise. I'm joined by my co-host, Caleb and Nathan, and our first in-person guest in quite a while, Pastor Darcy Albers. Tell a little bit about yourself, Darcy.
Sure. Pastor right now in St. Albert. Grew up on a small farm in Alberta, so not so far from home right now. And excited to be here today, so thanks for having me in.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, we've got, when this first came across our desk, to use very professional sounding language, so I'll just set up the topic now. The video is theology of food. And so when we first took a look at this, we're like, what? But then, we read your outline and it was like, oh, so yeah.
I think part of it came up was because I was at the NALC youth gathering in Outlook, Saskatchewan. Shout out to Outlook.
Yeah.
With Darcy and a few other NALC pastors. And we were delivering meals that we had made at the church to just some workers that were working on a potato farm. And I remember you bringing up the theology of food and how, as we were waiting for these guys, and just how that's just such a big part of our lives. We don't even realize what just giving food to someone can do. And I was like, man, I want to talk about that.
Let's talk about food. Yeah.
Let's talk about food.
And I think food is an interesting topic, especially in a theological setting, because we don't associate it with theology right?
Yeah.
It's something that, generally speaking, we love talking about, right? Foodie culture has taken off, right? People they'll take photos of their food and put it on the internet, which is I'll admit I'm a little bit of that foodie culture guy, but I'm not necessarily going to be the photo guy. But I will tell a little bit about kind of how this became kind of an area of interest for me. So there's a few things coming together. I've always enjoyed food. I've always enjoyed cooking, even from a fairly young age. But when it really came to together was before I was a pastor, I served as a missionary overseas. And my wife and I, we were just getting our feet under us. And she was expecting a baby, so she was exhausted by the time we got to the end of the day after teaching at the boarding school, the missionary school we were at. And so it was up to me to cook. I had to make food, which was fine. I liked to do it, but there was no pre-made or easy food options available. And so I just had to learn the basics of cooking. I could go out into the market and find vegetables and meat and the basics, but then I actually had to cook. But then I found that after preparing a meal and sharing that with my wife, I was de-stressed and felt way better than I had than when I began.
Interesting. Yeah. That's
and so that kind of, I'd always liked it, but that really sparked it strongly. The other thing is, and this is a little bit harder to describe, but I think you guys will get it. So, do you know C.S. Lewis? He talks about his experience of joy and how important that was in kind of his discovery of faith, right? He had a particular word for that, Sehnsucht, I think it was, right? It's this German word to describe not just happiness, but this kind of
joy,
deep sense of purpose and meaning and yearning and joy that he experienced in life. And for him, he discovered that through nature, I think, in a sense, but then also through myth and legend. That kind of sparked that joy in him. And for other people, it can be you're out on a hike where you see the beauty of creation and get that sense of joy. For me, I experienced that sense of joy on a plate. That's where I feel the beauty, the wonder of creation actually comes to life for me. And it comes together in a really compelling way.
Yeah, that's it.
And so it sparked that kind of deeper wonder about food and what this means. And then a missionary overseas receiving theological training kind of opened my eyes a little bit to this idea of what is the place of food in our faith and in our theology? How do we understand this? And once I started to read the Bible through a little bit of that lens, started to see food theology everywhere.
Right.
I wonder, that's so interesting to me. I was reading an article for school last year, and how it was it was talking about how in our society we're all about saving time, and we're all about just beating the clock. And the article was about well, what are we actually saving time for, right? Why are we saving time? But part of what they were saying is like there's so much more satisfaction in actually like sitting down, putting ingredients together
Yeah.
to make a meal.
Yeah.
Like with the joy you were talking about.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, I guess the alternative would just be like warming up a pizza pocket in the microwave. There's no
Yeah.
satisfaction in that. There's no like joy that comes out of that. That's just so that we can save time, bank it for something else.
Which usually is like short sunlight.
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
phone
yeah,
or something like
exactly.
that.
Just another
exactly.
meaninglessness.
Well,
Yeah.
even like before we met at the church here for this episode, both Caleb and Nathan were at my apartment this morning, and so I made them coffee. But I don't we just moved to Edmonton, so I don't have like a drip coffee machine. I just have this mocha pot, like kind of like the cowboy style coffee, and it makes 1 cup at a time, and it takes probably like 10 minutes per cup because you got to heat it up on the stove and let the and
But there's something awesome about that.
it's really inconvenient. I didn't even get my morning coffee this morning, but I was able. It was fulfilling in a sense because I got to each make you guys a cup of coffee and have fellowship over that and put my efforts to something early in the morning.
And it was really good.
Nice.
Yeah.
we enjoyed it.
No,
from your effort.
Yeah.
and that reminds me exactly of a story at that similar time, right? Early on the mission field, kind of discovering cooking and food in a deeper way. So coffee was a little bit harder to find at that point.
Mhm.
So we would make one like press of coffee on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Power would sometimes cut in and out. And I remember once I was starting to grind and the power cut, and it just was like, this is unjust. I cannot live in this place. So we bought a hand grinder.
Yeah.
And then took it with us one time. So I'd hand grind and then like do a press. And I've never ever enjoyed coffee the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just that the intentionality that went
Yeah.
behind it almost unlocks the depths of
Yeah.
pleasure in the good sense of that food can bring.
Very wholesome feeling of
Yeah.
like, I made this.
And
Exactly.
that is a wholly different experience from going to McDonald's and getting like a cup of coffee there.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's just like
You
it's
get
not
like-
you're getting food or you're getting your drink, whether you're making it or you're going to McDonald's, but it's like it's a completely different.
It's like a half pleasure.
Yeah.
It's like we get
It's like the
pleasure
shadow of the
eating, but
real
not-
thing.
Yeah, but not the
Yeah.
pleasure of the actual like full experience of food.
So
Yeah.
what specifically is it? Would you say it's the serving, making something for someone else, or even putting the effort into making something for yourself? Is that kind of the difference there? Is it the fact that it's like, you put the work in and, you got the ingredients and you made it happen, as opposed to, like, is it the fact that there's effort on your part? Do you
Yeah.
think? Like what goes into the,
That's certainly a part of it.
yeah.
But you just pointed out an interesting thing too, right? It's there can be a joy in preparing food, in cooking, in the creative aspect. And I think we can be kind of partner in a sense, right? We express the image of God as he's a
Wow.
creator. We
Yeah.
become creators.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Co-creators in a sense of the things he's given us to create something new and wonderful.
With the things he's given.
Again, and for me, that's part of the engaging with creation in a way that is super compelling for me and which I love. But then it's not just that, it's a gift, right? Like
Right.
it's not something that I'll say it like this. I've tried a number of like creative outlets in my life, poetry or art or music, and none of them clicked. I just couldn't figure out what that was for me until it was cooking, right? And then because you're making something, you're creating something,
Right.
but it's impermanent. It's gone pretty soon, usually, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it matters. It's a real thing that you can share with other people too. And so, yeah, there's this wonderful kind of
That's so interesting. That impermanence too of like the
Yeah.
art is so
So, we've talked a lot about this holistic, giving, intentionality, co-creation with God, with his gifts. But where, this theology of food, when we go to scripture, how do we see this, a theology of food shining through? How does the
Yeah.
scriptural narrative identify itself? Or even how does, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, how does God himself identify with things
Why does
as
he-
normal
and why
as
does
food?
he care? Like why should we care about food as like part of our Christianity even?
Sure. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that there's kind of two ways in which we can talk about that I think are helpful. one, we can just look at the biblical place of food generally, but then also how closely tied food is into the story of salvation,
Yeah.
into the very patterns of like
Mhm.
fall and redemption and those kinds
Yeah.
of pieces. So yeah, biblically
Yeah.
speaking, like I said, it's one of those things where to say, oh, theology of food, like what are you
Yeah,
talking about
yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? But I think this is a unique thing for us at this stage of like Protestant Christianity in particular, because for most world religions beyond even Christianity, they have some sort of food regulation
Mhm.
about what they eat or won't
Yes,
eat,
right,
right?
right.
Like just food laws, right? Kosher
Yeah.
laws, halal laws, and
Mhm.
things like that. And even within Christian expression after the New Testament, which again, the kind of abrogation of food laws,
Yeah.
the vision of
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I was
sheep
thinking
and the
about-
animals to Peter, right? Like it's that was important, right? That was an
Yeah,
important
that was
thing
big.
for the early church. How shall you eat, and what that means for your identity and faith
Yeah.
was actually a crucial question in Acts and through the New Testament that they were looking
Yeah.
at.
Mhm.
And even through like the church history after the fact, how you fast, what you eat at different times of the season were a very just normal, like woven into the patterns of faith and life, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Enough to the point that I think I get this right in the Swiss Reformation. Like we have Luther nailing the 95 Theses is kind of like the big moment of the Reformation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is correct, but in the Swiss Reformation with Zwingli, his big moment was standing up in a tavern and eating a sausage
Interesting.
in Lent,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
was
Okay, yeah, right.
which
Yeah.
was banned at the time.
Yeah.
Right? So it was kind of this.
Yeah. That's so what a boss.
Yeah.
Right.
Just munched on a broadverse.
Yeah, no kidding. Right? But again, what a bizarre act of protest in our
Yeah.
mind, right? But
Yeah.
for them,
Yeah.
it totally made sense.
Yeah, there's like
Mm.
religious protest because still in the Catholic Church you're not able to eat certain meats during Lent, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I don't know how much they enforce that. But
Right. That's technical.
Yeah.
yeah.
But even like, yeah, and this is something that I've often reflected on. Again, one of the great spiritual disciplines that the church has always held on to and proclaimed is fasting,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And yet, how much really do we practice that?
Yeah.
In kind of a
Yeah.
Protestant kind of
Or,
setting.
yeah.
It's almost not at all.
Or maybe-
There's exceptions.
Yeah, because when it comes to fasting, like I've heard so many people saying, like, yeah, well, it doesn't just have to be food, right? And
No.
that's like true. Like it's still
Mhm.
good to fast for
Yeah.
other things, but I think there's something very special about fasting,
Yeah.
food, right? Just like
Yeah.
denying yourself of
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting there because you have, like you mentioned before, with the like within Christianity, there's no food regulations. Like no like we don't have a kosher law. We don't have halal. It's like, and again, the vision of the sheep coming down with, there's this idea of it's for you. All of it
Correct.
is for you. And
Yeah.
there's no restrictions, and like there's a lot to talk about there, but we have that. And then in contrast, fasting or denying ourselves that thing that was so abundantly given is
Mhm.
like one of the main spiritual disciplines.
And-
Do you have any,
Yeah.
I'm just curious about, I just thought about
No, he just laid that out in a fascinating way. I think of, I'm gonna get this wrong, but like Luther's thing about the freedom of a Christian, right? As
Mhm.
a Christian is a
Lord,
yeah, help me out, boys.
Oh, look at this.
oh man, Lord of all, subject to none.
Lord of all, subject to none.
Subject to all.
Yeah.
Lord of all.
Lord.
Anyway, there's this contrast. There's this contrast.
Classic Lutheranism.
I hope none of my professors
Yeah,
are
yeah.
watching.
Freedom of a Christian.
There's so many times I've heard that quote. I should have it like
I know, I should.
nailed down.
Professor's on the other side.
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, right.
Shaking his head.
Monday we're talking about.
But the point is, so that we do know, is that there is this kind of wonderful, I think, tension of
Yeah.
the freedom that we have, and yet the service that we still remain under.
Yeah.
And I think that what you just pointed out there, it's given to us. Like the food laws are broken down, right? It's wide open. Everything's kind of free game,
Mhm.
and yet in that freedom, we can still find a sense of service to God, even to neighbor somehow.
Yeah.
But I think that's the really interesting question is for us that it's very, because I think we've kind of lost this kind of culture of food and faith coming together.
Mm.
It's kind of a mystery trust to what that even can look
Yeah.
like.
Right.
And I think what you mentioned too, we talk about fasting and we usually talk about getting rid of our bad habits, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine. But I do think we've lost something by actually just the most literal definition of going
Yeah.
without food.
Yeah.
But it's something that's so like crucial to your own existence too,
Yeah.
to say,
Yeah.
I'm going to abstain from this for the sake of
Yeah.
just focusing on my spiritual life or whatever that is in like
Yeah.
Lent especially, right?
Well,
And
sorry.
yeah, and the fact you're not giving up something that's inherently bad, you're giving up something
Something
that's
good.
inherently good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of ties into the larger Christian ethic on most things, where things are good, but they can be used badly,
There you go.
and you need to use them in moderation.
Yeah.
You know, the classic, Christian ethic. Sex is good in the
the
context
proper context
of marriage between a man and a woman.
Yeah.
Food is good, but the New Testament condemns drunkenness, gluttony. And I think Nathan and I have talked a little bit about this, in this day and age, young men are just feeling helpless because, they struggle with lust. But
Yeah.
you read the fathers, the church fathers, and they say, if you're struggling with lust, you should fast.
Yeah.
Because you're denying yourself
Yeah.
carnal
Yep.
pleasures. And
it's like
Interesting.
it builds this discipline
Yeah.
into you that's just so just otherworldly, right? Like we don't have that discipline in ourselves, right? Like we're not able to just deny ourselves good things on our own. That's through the Holy Spirit we're able to do
Yep.
that, right? And I think that's part of like just walking with Christ,
Yep.
is being able to do that stuff, things like that.
I'll share two things that jump to mind, and I think this will transition us into the next part of the conversation really well too. One is, I remember, again, of course, so I did my missionary work in an Islamic context, which has a really strict kind
Yeah.
of fasting period, right? The
Yeah.
month of Ramadan.
Mhm.
And I practiced that just to kind of experience what
Sure.
that would be like.
Cool,
And
cool, yeah.
which was, again, really fascinating.
Yeah.
But then also I remember speaking with another missionary once, and they said, kind of struggling with this idea of too, like, what's the point of fasting? He said, like, I've tried fasting, but I think the sin of irritability that like came out
Yeah,
of that
right,
was
right.
greater than any
Interesting.
spiritual benefit he's had.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
for me, that's exactly the point. Is yeah, I can feel good natured towards God and my fellow man when my blood sugar's up, right? But as soon as that's down, all of a sudden my assumption of how good I am
Yeah.
starts to get a little frayed, right? And all of a sudden I come to face with my own sinful nature, in a sense.
Yeah.
Which, again, especially as Lutherans, ought not to terrify us, right? Like, that's just second use of the law, showing us our need for a savior, right? And so I think that's one of the joys of fasting. The other thing you said, and I think this is really compelling too, is I think what sometimes the way that we conceive of sin and temptation, we've spiritualized it to the point where it's almost separate from who we are as embodied human beings, right?
Right.
And I get that. And I think I've heard even sermons, right? And they say, oh, temptation, it's so much more than just being tempted by like the cookie jar, like as a kid, right?
Yeah.
And that's true, right? Like sin and temptation working around, it's rebellion against God, right? It's faithlessness, it's lovelessness, it's all these awful things. But it's also not less than being tempted by the cookies in the cookie jar,
Right.
because our bodies want them. We crave the sweet.
Yeah.
We crave the things that are bad for us, right?
Yeah.
And so sin takes hold of our physical appetites, in a way to express itself in us. And I think this is a biblical thing that I found really interesting about this. So in the Garden of Eden, right, in the temptation, right?
Yeah.
There's the trees, the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent comes to tempt Eve. The first point of temptation for her is not simply the spiritual side, it's that the fruit looked good.
Right.
It looked good as
Pleasing
food.
to the
It
eye.
looked pleasing to the
Yeah,
eye, and
right.
it was desirable as food, right?
Yeah.
And then there was also everything else that went with it, right? So there was this just very basic physical temptation that was an aspect of that very first temptation.
Right.
I want this, right? This looks good. I want to experience that.
Yeah.
And then we fast forward to Jesus's temptation in the desert. Where does Satan attack him? First point. He's fasting 40 days. He's hungry.
Yeah.
Turn these stones into bread.
If you're hungry, just turn stone.
Just eat, right? What's wrong with that, right?
Mm.
And then Jesus says, no, man will not live by bread alone, but by the word of God. That that temptation often comes to us through just our physicality as human beings.
Right.
And Jesus wants to redeem that. And, that's the incarnational claim of Christianity. For it to be forgiven, for it to be redeemed, it had to be taken on in the person and work of Jesus. And you mentioned how, how does sin come into the world? Partially it comes in through
Food.
good looking food.
Yep.
And yet, how does salvation come to the world?
Mm.
It comes through
Bread of
Jesus,
life.
the bread of life.
Yeah.
And looking at your notes prior to the episode, this has, an eschatological
There you go. Well
element
done.
element too.
Yeah.
We read in the Revelation of the tree that provides
Yeah.
one of your favorite verses. You
Yeah.
would be able to
Well, it just says that, there in heaven, in the kingdom, there's rivers, 4 rivers, and in the center there's the tree.
Mhm.
And I think at least in the my NLT, I read the NLT.
Shut it down.
Got it.
Shut it down. In my NLT version of the Bible, the subheading is New Eden, or Eden Restored, I believe it says. So there's a lot of parallels happening there with Eden and with
Yeah.
going back, but there's also something new happening, and it's different. But the tree there, it says the leaves of the trees are for the healing of
Yeah.
the nations.
Bearing
So
12
that object,
kinds of fruit.
that object that led to the fall of man, that tree
Yeah.
of life that led to the fall and
Yeah.
sin and everything else,
Yeah.
is now being used
Yeah.
to restore creation,
And,
to restore
and
the
given
nations.
back abundantly, right?
Yeah.
The 12 kinds
Yeah.
of fruit. Like, just
Yeah.
Oh, so
Redeeming.
cool, man.
Yeah.
It gives me
That-
chills.
And that whole eschatological theme, right? Of
Yeah.
the fact that we don't just look forward to a disembodied, ghostly
Mhm.
afterlife, right? But there's this
Mhm.
promise of resurrection,
Yeah.
which has a
Physicality,
bodily,
yeah.
a physicality,
Yeah.
reality to it. And there's a mystery to that too. But that means food somehow. And actually,
Right.
even in biblical
way.
biblical painting of these eschatological visions
Yeah.
are often food centric.
Mhm.
Like the great
Banquet table.
the banquet table, yeah, especially the great Isaiah verse that we read every Easter. I'll prepare a table before you of rich foods, old wine,
Yeah.
and at this table I will swallow death
Mm.
forever.
Wow.
I'm going to redeem this. Yeah.
You mentioned these 2 trees, right? Like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil,
Mhm.
the entry of sin into the world through food, the tree of life at the end bearing
Fruits for
fruits for the healing of the nations. But then there's also that tree right in the middle, right? Like the
Mhm.
cross, right?
Mm.
Which is
Yeah.
fruit bearing in a very strange kind of way.
Yeah,
And yet
yeah.
we see Jesus hanging there,
Yeah.
giving of himself for
Yeah.
our healing, our wellness, our life, right?
Man, who wrote this book?
Yeah.
Well, I was just like, God wrote it.
You could track this like through the story of Scripture, like
Yep.
Old Testament and New Testament, just how important this is from the very beginning to the very end and the middle, like we've been talking about those like central
Yeah.
theme of tree and bearing fruit
Yep.
from that.
Mm-hmm.
But even like, yeah, all of the things, all of the rituals that needed to be done when it in the Old Testament to Israel, and I think one that you could really point to is the story of the Passover and how salvation came through
Mm-hmm.
a lamb there, and they had to partake of that and spread the blood on the doorpost, and how that reflects. They were getting into this too quickly, but like that now also is a foreshadowing of the Lord's Supper.
Yep.
And how we partake of the body and blood of Christ, and that brings us forgiveness and life.
Yeah, and that's the height of kind of food theology, is Eucharistic theology.
Yeah.
Right? For sure.
Yeah.
So,
Just before we get into
Yeah.
Eucharistic theology, before we were talking about how, at first a theology of food and reading scripture through the lens of, thinking about food seems kind of wacky, but then you see that it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And just an example from my life. when my grandfather passed away, I got the call that he passed away after he battled cancer, and I got it right as I was sitting down for a meal.
Hmm.
And so I got the news that he passed away, and I'm looking at this plate of food in front of me, and I was like, well, he is partaking in the feast that will never end, and I'm eating of this food and we're on both sides of the veil.
Yeah.
And yet there's something in common. And so that's sort of, that typology is, powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Food is everywhere, and it usually points to something about God or
Yeah.
life with him or
And it's so like what an amazing tool when it comes to just like very like practical things like getting to know someone or like
Yeah.
just being able to like have a really in-depth conversation with someone. Some of my best conversations have happened over a meal, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's so like not unsettling, but like what's the what's the word where it's like it's just easy.
Disarming.
Disarming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, that's it.
Well, and you read the book of Galatians, and that was a big problem in the Galatian church. Jewish Christians would not eat
Yeah.
with Gentile Christians. And that was where the whole
Yeah.
problem snowballed, is that they couldn't have table fellowship. And that's what Paul is,
Hammers on.
that's why he's
Yeah.
really writing the letter.
And what it was one of the great criticisms of Jesus from the Pharisees, this guy doesn't just care for sinners or love them from a distance, he eats with them.
Yeah.
How dare he?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Jesus is like, you bet I do.
Yeah.
And he goes to their house and he sits at the table with
Yeah.
them, right? Like, and it's
Yeah.
this act of
Yeah.
like
That would have carried like us, like food is important in all our culture, but like I think that would have carried an extra amount of like gravitas, when you go in that context, in that day, in that place, region, when you went to eat with somebody, that was like, or when you brought someone into your home, that was like deeply, that was very
An
significant.
expression of unity.
It's an expression of deep unity and community with that person. That you've not just invited them to share a table with you, you've invited them to share life
Yeah.
with you.
And you like you still see that in lots of places in the world. Like when as part of like the CLBI program in your second year, you get to go on a cross-cultural trip. And I went to Brazil and we were walking around this village in Brazil, me and my friends on this team. And we stopped at like every household for a cup of coffee because everyone was like, come in for coffee, come.
Yeah.
And they just like bring everything out and like cookies and coffee and whatever they had in their house.
Yeah.
Like big or small, they just gave it all. Because they were like, we just want you to feel welcome here.
Yeah.
And it's just so memorable, right? Like your memory is attached to that coffee of this village. And it's so important.
It is. And like we talk about, it unites us together in life too. But what's so shocking scripturally is how God uses food, institutes food, even from old Levitical worship, right? Which was a lot closer to like a butcher and a slaughterhouse than like what we associate with like nice, cozy, tidy church, right? It was meat roasting over a fire, right? It was a huge part of that. That brings people together, but then also connects them with God, right? And again, we talk about the Eucharist, right? About how it's kind of the height of this food theology. And what does that do, right? It's this, it's more than food, but it's not less than food, right? We gather together for a meal that draws us and unites us together, and then unites us also with God. And for me, it's so profound too, because the thing about food that's so interesting, and I think part of the reason that we struggle to talk about it with, is it's deeply personal, right? It's actually one of those things where many people, including myself, feel the effects of sin through food, right? I stress eat. Like I know it about myself, right? Like when I get amped up, I self-soothe by eating, right?
Sure.
Which is just idolatry, right? By Luther's explanation, the thing that you look to in a time of help, right? That's your God, right? And I know that about myself, and I struggle with that about myself. And so food is a way in which I experience the effects of sin, but food is also a way in which I experience the effects of God's grace and love and forgiveness. There's a law gospel dynamic even to the reality of food in our lives. And that's one of the main kind of things that I've in my leaning into this kind of area of theology have discovered.
Well, that is so profound, that law gospel connection you made. Not only is food a struggle, but food is forgiveness for you too, because I mean, a Lutheran sacramental theology says a major way in which God works is through a sacrament, which is a divine promise attached to an earthly gift. And so essentially God, his major way of working in the world is through bread, and it's through wine to deliver his promise of life and salvation.
100%.
These common things. Sort of
Through food.
Extraordinary.
Anyone has access to bread and wine in those days, kind of thing. So
Well, and every culture kind of has its version of bread somehow. Like, it is the most
just so
base
universal
form of food.
Anywhere in the world. It's so interesting. Are we able to like talk a little bit more about the Eucharist and just how even just make like a case for it and it being connected like through Scripture?
Oh,
that's no, that's great, because there's for our non-Lutheran viewers,
This is gonna come as like a surprise, maybe. Idea.
We are a Lutheran podcast. No, but like there's a like within the Lutheran Church, the Eucharist communion carries significance. It carries a great deal of significance. Like it means something more than this is like a symbolic kind of gesture that we do. So for us, there's a great deal of significance there. I think and like I can't speak to each individual, but in other traditions like Pentecostal, evangelical, like there's a different understanding. So maybe if we could just like get into that and kind of talk about how within the Lutheran Church there is like greater significance.
Yeah, there's so much there, right? Like unpacking Eucharist. I mean, that's a topic all in its own, for a thing. But I think one of the things that I do think that is important to recover a little bit when we think about it is that the Eucharist is much more than food, right? It's more than bread. It's more than wine. It's more than symbol, but it's also not less than food, right? So there's an interesting, I grew up under the tradition where sometimes people have like a first communion where they wait to a certain, sometimes it's tied with confirmation, sometimes it's tied to a class. But I grew up in a tradition where you can receive as soon as like coming forward as baptized, right? So I never remember a time when I didn't receive communion. And as a child, I think, did I grasp the depth of what was going on? Of course not, right? And yet I knew that this was food. Like this was like, we kind of you can almost kind of irreverently talk about it like it's like a little church snack, right? But I think there's actually something delightful in that, right? That you're coming together and it's hospitality, right? You're experiencing kindness and grace.
A meal together.
As a church together, table, and yet there is also this sense that this isn't just something that we're doing for ourselves, it's a gift that God is bringing down to us, right? And again, within our Lutheran sacramental understanding, it's Jesus himself, it's God himself who's tied to this gift and who comes to us, right? When Jesus says, I am the bread of life,
I'm the true vine,
that's symbolic, but in the sacrament it becomes somehow more than that, right? Where it's communing. I mean, that literally
common union
with God, right? And like I said, it's this sin enters the world through food, and yet the medicine for sin, grace, salvation, forgiveness also comes through these very physical earthly needs to us.
What is so within the Lutheran sacramental understanding, what is it that we say? We say that Christ is present in, with, and under.
Yeah, that's kind of the classic framework. And people will kind of, there's all sorts of like attempts to kind of define exactly how we understand that, right? But I think one thing that's interesting is, and again, I don't want to be unfair to Catholic viewers or understanding. There's this transubstantiation, right? That it's very nature changes, where it's actually, it looks like bread and wine, but it actually now is flesh and blood, body and blood. Where we don't say that. We actually say that it can be both at the same time. It never stops being bread and wine, but also is truly body and blood.
Would we be more like on the side of the mystical union, where there's like something happening that we don't really understand fully, at least, but we would say this is fully the bread and wine and fully the body and blood.
And I actually love that, because as we said, we're focusing on food. It doesn't become less than food. It's still always, it's a little, it's not much, right? Like I'm not going to make a feast of it. And yet it still is food for me. And so much more.
Because why are we tempted to make it less than food when our Lord himself, identifies himself with these common things? Unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood. Although the Lutheran understanding is not that is talking about communion, but nevertheless, he identifies with these things. So we shouldn't, not only should we take him seriously that he is present here, but we also shouldn't sort of dismiss bread or wine.
There's so much that comes together in the Eucharist, typologically out throughout all the scriptures. Like it's so deep and it's so rich, right? But the food aspect is one of those, absolutely, that I think we can even lean into and recover a little bit, for sure. You talked about kind of the humility of God, right? Kind of descending himself in humility to offer himself to us as food, right? Eat my flesh, drink my blood, which was so offensive sounding, right? Of course, to the people of the age. But one of the things that I found in preparation for speaking with you guys and just thinking through this, it's so simple, but this profound image of Jesus risen from the dead, victorious over death, victorious over the devil, victorious over hell, returns to his disciples who let him down. They're out fishing on the lake. He calls them back in as the resurrected Lord of all, right? All authority over heaven and earth has been given unto him. And he's there, he creates a fire, and he's making breakfast for them. Right?
And it's this like, it's fish and bread. Right. And it's just like, something that would have even connected with the disciples, just all the different miracles that Jesus did, including those things like the feeding of the 5,000.
And just the simple, like you said, the love and the hospitality, the gift of food. That we prepare
You're still
food
welcome
for
at
one
my
another.
table.
You're still welcome at my table. And I'm gonna do, I mean, in a sense, right? Like even now, there's a little bit of this idea that like that was kind of woman's work, right? Like the kitchen was kind of like that was lower work, and yet there's Jesus.
There's Jesus doing it.
There's Jesus doing it.
Breakfast.
Eating breakfast. Extending his grace and forgiveness to those that he loved.
Is not beneath eating with us. So interesting.
And therefore we shouldn't be beneath it either, right? Not that, we consider food something to be, because it's important to us, but I think we could imbue it with so much more importance if we know who Jesus is and what he's done.
So now how does this affect, I guess, moving into more of like practical side of things? Where do we go from here then? Like knowing that we have this theology of food. This is really important. It's all over scripture. We didn't even talk a lot about like gluttony and how those commands are all over the Bible. Right. To not be gluttonous, but I guess we touched on it a little bit.
Or withholding food from those who need it, right? The support of the poor. And
So I guess with all these things in mind, and even the Eucharist and stuff, where do we go from here? What does that mean for us now?
And that's a fascinating thing, right? And I'll admit, even in myself, like I feel like I have a fairly high value in theology for food, but I struggle to practice that well in my life, right? Like I'll throw a pizza pocket in the microwave, right? Like to get through the day and eat completely thoughtlessly, focused on anything else. But I think there's two things. And and I'll sum this up as briefly as possible.
Mhm.
I actually just read it in First Timothy. Paul's giving his advice to Timothy. It's before the classic, like, don't look anyone down on you because you're young. He says, don't pay attention to old wives' tales, and don't pay attention to those who are like trying to set up food laws again, right?
Yeah.
Receive all things in thankfulness.
Hmm.
And I do think it's stereotypical in some ways, right? But like the Christian family or Christian friends gathered around food saying a word of thanks to God
Mm.
is actually quite a profound thing,
Sure.
especially in a world where we assume that this food is, in a sense, like it's my right? Not only to like basic food, but like good food.
Good food,
And
yeah.
food that meets my certain standards.
Yeah.
But instead to receive that as a gift. And again, this is a whole nother thing, but Luther talks about, I think in the Large Catechism, about the first article.
Yep.
There's this fascinating thing where I think it's in the Large Catechism. He's talking about God's provision, and he says he looks out into the fields and sees the farmers at work and sees God feeding him, God providing for him.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes there's a theological kind of idea. It's just called concurrence, right? It's the idea that two things can happen at the same time, right? Like
Mhm.
farmers can be out in a field because they need to be there and they need to do their work.
Yeah.
But it can also be God working in and through
Yeah.
them simultaneously in order to bring about his will and purposes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that pizza pocket in the microwave, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, kind of the industrialization and like that whole, how many steps of separation between us and our food is a real
Yeah.
issue.
Mm.
But let's consider, in a sense, like the actual farmers who went into like the
Yeah.
grain, turning that into flour, the dairy people who had the cheese, the
Yeah.
people who made the tomatoes,
Mhm.
the trucks, the auto manufacturers who make the trucks, the oil industry to fuel those trucks, to get that stuff
Yeah.
to the factory,
Mhm.
the factory workers to put all that together, the packaging containers, the
Mhm.
grocer manager,
Yeah.
the guy who just stocks shelves,
Yeah.
you, the microwave maker and technicians,
Yeah.
all of those webs of connection
Mhm.
are means by which God is pulling together in order to feed you.
He milks the cow through the milkmaid.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that, I think that as much as, like I said, there's a problematic thing to, like you
Yeah.
said, our food systems.
Yeah, sure.
And yet at the same time, that's how God feeds us. And I think there's something incredibly beautiful
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
And
So yeah,
spe-
thankfulness.
I guess, thankfulness and just receiving these as a gift.
And speaking to the practical aspect of things, like I think that this is really, as we're talking, this is really causing me to reflect on the ministries that we have that are related to food.
Yep.
You know, like soup kitchens
Yep.
and so forth for homeless.
Yep.
And just how, like, I think there's a reason that particular service is so big within
Yep.
Christian ministries, right?
Yep.
Like feeding the homeless, feeding the hungry. You know, and it's a command of Christ too, you know, when you know, Lord, when did we see you hungry
Yep.
and naked and feed and clothe you, and you know, whatever you didn't do for the least of these, you didn't do for me, kind of thing. So there's a command there too. And just within the context now of what we've talked about, there's like, you know, that yes, like sin entered the world through that fruit, but now Jesus is the bread of life and he's redeeming. So yeah, like actually, how dare you deny this person one of the gifts and that I've given, like, you know, in the food, in the bread, you know, yes, give that person the bread because I am the bread of life, you know, and that in itself is, you know, really, really significant. So,
and was a mark of the church from the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like almost immediately after Pentecost in Acts, they're gathering together and they have to figure out how they're going to feed their people properly. And so they need to create apostles and deacons and
so it makes me think like, I'm curious and looking forward to the next time I get the chance to volunteer at a soup kitchen or a drop-in center or something like that. And, you know, just now with this new sort of lens, and it kind of makes me want to go out and do that and just see like how Christ is being represented in this very basic, you know, even if it like the drop-in center in Calgary where I've volunteered a few different times, and it's, you know, it's not much. It's like pancakes and like an egg and a sausage, but like that is big, you know.
And it's a gift.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Lots to
There's
think
our-
about.
So go volunteer.
Yeah.
Go eat.
Go eat.
Thank God for the food on your table.
Yeah.
one
Amen.
of those episodes that I feel like is so like close to home in a lot of ways that it's really going to force me to like not just think about the theology of it, but like put into practice some of these
Mhm.
Yep.
things. So yeah, this was really good. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Do you have any other things you want to add, just as like kind of a final thoughts?
A
Or
bow tie. No.
Yeah, I don't know. It's great. And like what you said too, though, there's I think we're so thought less about our food or
Mhm.
obsessed about our food
Yeah.
in a weird kind of way. And
Yeah,
I think there
yeah,
has
yeah.
to be this middle ground that we can find where,
Mhm.
and just as you mentioned the intentionality, right? Like wanting to go forward and thinking about your food differently. I made pancakes this morning instead of just having a bowl of cereal because I wanted to make something because I was like, oh, hey, I want to actually think about this
Yeah,
and be
right.
more engaged. And so, it was good for me. It was good for me to stop and reflect on that too. And,
just taking time.
Yeah.
Just taking the time to not scroll on reels and instead to
Say it ain't so.
make coffee or make pancakes or
And not get my own morning coffee because I'm making it for you too.
yeah.
we're gonna go and buy some coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks so much, Darcy. This was a
It was a
great
blast.
episode. We'll
Yeah,
have to
thanks
have
for
you
having
on
me.
Thanks, buddy.
again for
Thank you.
something else.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe we'll follow this up with an episode on the Eucharist. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I guess we should also mention that we are currently filming in St. Matthew's Evangelical Lutheran Church. This is one of the first episodes we've done here. Besides, you might have seen a Theology on the Screen episode here. Yeah, we're experimenting with different spaces and stuff like that. So tell us what you think. And
If you like the balcony view, let us know. And
Yeah.
we can
German in the background.
Yeah.
German in the background.
over the sanctuary.
Very Lutheran.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice space. So thank you, St. Matthew's.
Thank you, St. Matthews. And thank you guys for tuning into this episode of Theology on the Rise. We appreciate your support, your continued viewership and support. What's your favorite food? Tell us in the comment section your favorite
There you
food.
go.
Tell us
Yeah.
what you ate for, I don't know, lunch today or whatever.
Yeah. Your last meal. That's the one I like. Like,
Yes.
You have a last
What's
meal.
your last
What's your
meal gonna
last
be?
meal?
Yeah. It's got to be lobster. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you again, Darcy, for being here. Thank you, Seth and Nathan, for being awesome hosts. We will catch you guys in the next one. Take care.
God bless.
God bless.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of Theology on the Rise. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and please leave a comment in the comment box down below. Tell us what you think of the episode. Tell us what topics you'd like to see covered in future episodes. We really appreciate all of your support and we hope to catch you in the next one. Take care.